How do you view the land sale?
The government has put in money, and the money doesn't come from the government, it comes from us taxpayers. Yeah?
And not just social media, internet in general. I think it makes children lose their childhood a little bit.
This is an opportunity for us to look deep into ourselves and really ask ourselves, what have we gotten our children into?
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Amalina, Kamal, your host, and before we get into today's topic of discussion, I'd like to introduce our new co-host on set. She's not new, for the set for the show, but yes, as my co-host, Elena Koshy. Welcome.
It's very, very exciting to be here. I am absolutely thrilled and even more excited to dive into some of the big stories shaping conversations this week.
Indeed. And we've got two interesting topics for today. The first, of course, will be going into diving the questions surrounding how we are protecting our ecosystem. And the second, how are we protecting our children?
Two big heritage. And our natural heritage and, of course, our children, who is also our heritage, right?
So the topic for the first segment here is on Zoo Negara's controversial decision to sell a piece of land it's owned since 1963. So the zoo says that this particular move was actually very needed because it's been dealing with a lot of financial issues, especially during the pandemic. And also we thought that, things have been more brighter, but with the sale, it says otherwise.
I think it's also because of the lack of funds, because in recent news they said that they only had 1 million in their savings, and it's not enough to run a zoo. But what does that mean for the surrounding ecosystem when this piece of land is being sold? As big as, if I'm not mistaken, 54 football fields. It's a big piece of land. So so here to discuss this, we have with us naturalist and President of Ecotourism and Conservation Society Malaysia, Andrew Sebastian, joining us today on set to unpack these questions.
Welcome, Andrew, to this set.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the show and being the first.
Right. And also later in the show, we turn to a different but equally troubling issue, the rise of violent crimes in school.
Shocking new recent cases have reignited public concern over student safety, mental health, and how families and schools share responsibility in protecting our children. So two stories, one common thread, how we safeguard what matters most, our environment and our children. So let's begin.
We start with the first segment, of course, the sale of Zoo Negara. Andrew, from your perspective, how do you view the land sale? What were the murmurs on ground prior to this news came about?
Right. Yeah. So it's not a new thing. Zoo Negara has always been linked to a lot of controversies. There's been a lot of murmurs about issues about alleged mismanagement. A call to help them went out during the pandemic. We all remember this in during the pandemic years, 2020 and 2021 and so on. Everybody sent donations, because we were told that animals were starving, they lacked of funds, members of the public and the local communities around them. They all got together and actually supported and provided funds and even food and so on for the animals and so on. So everybody got together to help the poor Zoo Negara get back on its feet during troubling times. Yeah. So again, it's still it's a bit of a bittersweet thing because in one hand, everybody was hit with the pandemic. No one was exempted. Yeah.
Right.
But look at all the other zoos around the world. Yeah. There was no closures. Yeah, there was no emergency sales. Nobody sold assets and so on. Nobody sold off their animals, the tigers, and to make funds. So maybe there are other issues at hand that the public needs to know about. Yeah, so I'm pretty troubled to know because there's one name called Zoo Hilltop. Zoo Hilltop is an idea that the previous management of the zoo was discussing to have. that very same parcel of land, which has now been sold, was earmarked to be developed as an ecotourism site. Trails were put together. There's even a pintu gerbang and entrance right now. They even put in toilets so that people can explore the hillside. Wire trails had been set up. They did an inventory of animals and stuff that's there. Of course, this is years ago. But very disappointing to know that avenue was not actually undertaken or developed, because ecotourism will work really great hand in hand with the Zoo Negara and its assets around them, which is the hills. Yeah. So there was an idea to turn that whole hill into an ecotourism site, servicing not only the local communities but also protecting biodiversity. That never happened.
Right. Right.
And that would have been a great source of income.
Yeah. True. But coming back to the zoo's dilemma, right? Having to have a deplete of funds, or at least like a very scarcity of funds there. Do you think there could have been other ways to raise it apart from public campaigns? Should the government, go in and provide better backing to this?
I think the government already gives a grant to the National Zoo, because it's a national zoo. Yeah, and maybe therein lies the problem. If we cannot compare it to Singapore Zoo, for example, but we can compare it to maybe a Taiping Zoo, for example. It's run by the municipal council. Yeah, so maybe what we can do is rethink how the national zoo is run. And this is the same battle call and battle cry that's been going on for all these years. The Malaysian Zoological Society, are you equipped to manage our national zoo, which is a national asset? Are you? I mean, come to terms. I mean, if you have to already start selling land to make up for your operations, maybe the government has to step in, because there was a lot of debate about whether the government should jump in and take over the whole running instead of being run by a zoological society. Maybe it's about time we talked about that.
It's true.
But it's also interesting to note about the hilltop zoo, because in recent interviews we were told that the area was unsuitable for use for zoo purposes. Being hilly, especially around this area, people were not keen to buy it because of landslide risks.
And someone bought it, So again, we are hearing two different stories. Yeah. So the previous zoo director, he had a great idea. Zoo Hilltop, introduce campsites, campgrounds, trails, and so on. People pay some money to go get in there, and that will be a great source of income for the zoo, because the zoo is a zoo, it's animals in captivity, but they also have three very important objectives. The zoo, Number one, they're supposed to be innovators. They're supposed to lead in conservation. They're supposed to inspire people. Yeah, you cannot do that if you're going to start selling your land, to pay for food for the animals and to pay for staff and so on. So, which means there's a problem with the management. Yeah, so maybe that's a serious thing that they have to rethink, because today they're going to sell land, and they did it on the quiet. What's going to happen tomorrow when they have same problem again?
Right.
What are they going to sell next?
Yeah. Just for context, for our audience to know. So earlier we had an interview with Environment Protection Society of Malaysia Vice President Randolph Jeremiah, who actually explained that the two plots of lands that were sold fall within hilly terrain, as we earlier also did touch on. Approximately about 50% of the land lies above 150 meters, classifying it as ESA, which is Environmental Sensitive Area, rank 3 under the National Physical Plan. So according to hill slope development guidelines, slopes ranging from 15 to over 35 degrees are considered class 3 slopes, which limit development to low density housing, meaning about 3 floors in that sense, or 7 to 39 units per acre lah. But why the residents, or why we're getting so much attention to this, because we don't know what the future will become of this particular area, right?
Let's take a look at what the NGOs have to say. Malaysia's National Zoo is back in the spotlight. This time, not for its animals, but for the land they live on. Zoo Negara has confirmed that part of its land, known as Zones B and C, will be sold to private developers, a move management says is meant to keep the zoo running, as the sale is necessary to cope with mounting operational costs. Both parcels, located at the fringes of the zoo's grounds in Ampang, sit on what experts describe as environmentally sensitive and hilly terrain.
Okay, so anyway, based on based on a quick assessment, and we know this is actually a hilly area, and for usually under our classification of hill slopes, so less than 150 meters is considered as flat land, but between 150 to 300 meters is considered hilly area. Okay, so that's such a classification, and there are guidelines to just that specify in terms of what you can or cannot develop along this area. So for plot B and C, based on a quick assessment, it's not a detailed assessment, and we know at least 50% of the area, around 50% is actually above 150 meters. Okay, it falls under ESA rank 3. Okay, the environmental sensitive area rank 3, which is actually prescribed under the National Physical Plan. And then under the guidelines on hill slope development, okay, so again, a quick and dirty estimation is that the slopes fall between exceeding 15 degrees, okay? And so some of the slopes are classified as class 3 slope between 25 and 35 degrees. So this limits the type of development that you can conduct on this area.
While the land is currently zoned for private recreational use, Randolph warns that converting it for commercial or high-rise development would contradict national planning and environmental safety guidelines.
And this whole area, besides having limestone formations, is also, but the reason is this area is important because of this. It's the hill slopes, etc. It's a hilly area and it has formations. And so this actually makes it a high-risk area. And of course, as we know, this was actually reported by the Menteri Besar that even Ampang Jaya has 112 red zones in terms of which is at risk of erosion. And so this whole area is actually naturally a hilly area. It's always been prone to landslide, etc.
Many residents and conservationists are calling for government intervention, suggesting that the state or federal authorities step in to provide better transparency and assure the public that the plots won't be developed with high-density projects.
The small patches of forest within the urban area, whether it's Kuala Lumpur or whether in Ampang Jaya, they also have a purpose to actually support biodiversity. May not be significant biodiversity, but at least for birds and small mammals, it still provides important habitat.
So, Kemensa itself has in the past, gained traction for having a lot of natural disaster issues, sinkholes, landslides, and behind it is just our quartz ridge, which is also quite a rarity in the world, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, and with that, there's also the dam there. So, overdevelopment, this is one thing why residents are putting a lot of attention to it.
No, but I also think it's also because of the lack of green spaces now, because it's constantly being shrunk as time goes by. We used to have a 45% land space, green space, and now it's slowly being, it's going down as time goes by. But, Andrew, in your opinion, what kind of environmental or ecological risk could arise if development proceeds there?
Well, just yesterday we were all amazed to see a tornado appearing, right? Just off the shore, just in Selangor, my God, it's just in awe. I would pay great money to go to America and to chase down a tornado. Very nice. But what happens in real life and reality? People get hurt, people damage property. People get hurt, and we are dealing with some forces that we are unsure of what's going to happen. There's a principle called the precautionary principle. You do not mess with something you don't understand. So here we are trying to protect as much as open spaces, recreational green lungs as we can, because there is studies around the world that shows communities that live around green areas or greenery tend to be more stress-free, tend to be less violent. That plays on to your next topic as well, I know. So here we are trying to save as much as we can, because the urban sprawl is taking away too much green lungs that are so crucial to the development of not just socially about people, but we also have to protect other people, other things that are living. People forget that the assets that Malaysia has, apart from beautiful people and landscapes, are its wildlife. who's going to speak for the wildlife? Who's going to tell them, hey, we have sold your patch of your home, you got to move somewhere else, who's going to be the voice, So
If not us, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And just to also note that Ampang Jaya has about 112 red spot hot zones that's prone to erosion and slope failure. And at least where plots B and C are concerned, it's located on the periphery of the Gombak Hulu Langat Geopark. An area characterized by limestone formations, steep terrain, and history of landslide.
That's right.
So that's why people are very on high alert, very tense.
So you're messing with all the powers of nature that can unravel, and the powers that be do not live there; they live somewhere else, So local residents, of course, people who are sensitive and people in the know-how about environmental damage, they are all raising the red flag to say, hey, we are messing with something that's going to come back and bite us. We are bringing more wildlife in closer contact to humans once you develop the area, once you mess with the slopes, as you turn an area from green to blue in your local plans, that is truly troubling. You open up the doors for it to be torn down. And what happens when you mess with one segment of the natural ecological cycle of the area? You mess with everything else. So you'll get more mosquitoes, you'll get more landslides, you can get more flash floods, and what is the environmental cost to this? So it's more than just a landowner that has been entrusted with a piece of land to service the community and to provide greenery, They were not told, hey, take the land and hey, if you bad times, just sell it. No, they were not given the land in perpetuity. They were given the land because they wanted to build something interesting, something important for the people, not to sell and to develop more. Because you can develop everywhere else, but the green patches and lands that's available on slopes, next to waterways, next to the Quartz Ridge, next to the Selangor State Park, These are areas that I think has to be protected by all means.
But the argument is that they are raising funds to expand the zoo, to build a better zoo.
I see.
What are your thoughts on that?
Again, they are giving mixed signals. They're giving mixed signals. I would like them to organize a public forum, to come on and be transparent, because the government has put in money, and the money doesn't come from the government, it comes from us taxpayers. Local communities have supported the zoo all these years. They deserve to know. They deserve to have an open forum with the Zoological Society, and for them to have to explain, because they have to explain, because people, it is not their money that they are playing with. They are playing with the public's money and the public's confidence and the name of our national zoo.
How, I suppose, relevant is it today? Is the setup of zoo for understanding how our wildlife works, how they interact in their natural habitat, and it's kind of like an oxymoron, right? Because they're not in their natural habitat. Yeah. We're actually relocating them, but we're studying them. It's a conservation sort of approach. Sure. That's the more politically correct sort of like trajectory that today, when people try to rationalize how zoos operate, that is the sort of reasoning that they go for, right? But in reality, how relevant is operating zoo today?
Yeah.
Zoos play an important role to connect people to nature, to connect people to wildlife. All the Attenboroughs in the world, all the people who are going to be environmental stewards or the future, they all grew up at going to a zoo or something and seeing a wonderful animal, and they get inspired. Not all of us can live like Tarzan, and sitting all
yes.
wildlife walking around us and feeding them bananas and so on. We all can't do that, But if you live in an urban setting like Kuala Lumpur, very few places you can go to see wildlife. And if you go to a national zoo or zoo, for example, they have embedded objective to expand awareness, to create awareness. They're supposed to help with captive breeding programs. They have supposed to be innovations in wildlife conservation. The zoo is just a microcosm of wildlife, and it's what happens in the natural habitat. We can study some certain wildlife in captive settings, like in the zoo. Yeah, that's a acceptable methodology. Mm-hmm. But zoos play an important role to connect people, and zoo that's going to be created or is running currently, it needs to hold itself to a higher degree of standards.
Do you happen to know how much it takes to operate like a how do I say, like an efficient zoo or like a good environment sort of zoo?
Yeah.
Is there a
I mean,
benchmark?
some zoos are small,
Yeah.
There's these funny things called mini zoos, they operate in a smaller budget, of course, yeah.
No, but I
Open zoos and so on, yeah.
I think the budget that was given was about 1.3 to 1.5 million
Yeah.
to run the National Zoo.
National Zoo, yeah.
At that point of time, when they were running short of funds, they only had about 1 million in the account, and they needed to sustain the zoo. So at that point, it was decided that the land concern should be sold. But Andrew, there's two ways of thought, two thought patterns. One is, yes, zoo is an important place to learn, but another, does zoo protect wildlife, or are they just glorified cages?
Well,
Or
a bit of both,
centers of conservation or captivity?
That's right.
Yeah, going back to the
That's
question.
that. Going back to the yeah. I mean, if it's run properly, if it's managed properly, a zoo with proper settings and with proper enclosures, they actually are comfortable for both people and the wildlife that's being kept. Unfortunately, for in the case of our Malayan tiger, the zoo in Taiping has some of the original strains of the Malayan tiger. So the original Malayan tiger, the DNAs are kept alive with the zoo with the tigers in Taiping Zoo. So zoos play a crucial, important role for DNA, for research, and in the hopes of somehow, at some point, captive release programs for certain animals. So, yes, it can be called as a glorified cage by some people, but if it's run and managed properly, following worldwide international standards, it can be a pleasant place, and it can be really a wonderful institution where conservation can really work.
Moving forward, is corporate sponsorship a way to go, or does it risk making the zoo itself being like a billboard, sort of like an avenue?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? If you run a good ship, if you run a good ship and you're very open about your finances, your funding, how it's run, you open yourself up to experts to come in to help you and so on, then corporate sectors will be more confident to say, hey, let's support them, let's lend them help, let's help them be sustainable. We can't just keep giving mock checks to them. Let's jump in and see how we can help, So I hope the corporate sector actually doesn't see this as as something negative. But moving forward, we do hope if Zoo Negara is continued to run by the Zoological Society, and it's been run since 1963. Maybe it's time for a change in management. Maybe, yeah. Hopefully corporate sectors can jump in, because a lot of captains of industries who really have the passion for wildlife, and they are important source of not just advice, they can open doors up to more networking and more funding, and to make it more sustainable.
So we talked about stricter audits, more transparency in terms of how administration works there within the zoological sort of department itself. And then the other aspect is the welfare checks, right? Not just about the management, but about the animals, right? So do we know to what extent these the animals or the species that we have in our current Zoo Negara?
Right. Well, again, I can only say from the pre-COVID days and COVID days, a lot of reports about some of the animals looking pretty scrawny and so on. So everybody we feel so bad. Let's donate money. Let's donate food. Stuff like that. Everybody came together because they saw all this imagery of some of the wildlife looking, malnutrition. For whatever reason, maybe right or wrong. But everybody jumped in to help. So again, what you see and what I see are the same things. Sometimes some of the enclosures are not so great. Some of the wildlife actually doesn't look so happy, from our perspective. But
I suppose credit must still be given to Zoo Negara in terms of how they're trying to still push for people to come, though. Like I think I've seen in the past they had like this Oyen campaign. They have their resident cat there, and then having to also integrate well with the capybaras. I think they're trying. They're trying.
No, I mean there are a lot of good people there who's still doing the work, and they carry the flag of the National Zoo. So the work still goes on. As we talk today, work still goes on. There are people in the zoo right now, kids running around, happy, smiling, So something is still working. But again, against the backdrop of this latest development, we can't help but wonder, but can it be run better? And if you ask captains of industries who can sit down in the board and say, hey, this needs to change, this needs to be streamlined, this can be more efficient, you get in people who know how to market, who know how to sell products, who know how to really put things together, marketing plan, merchandising plan, and of course a conservation plan. We would love to see them do more captive breeding and release programs. They haven't done it for some time now. So we have to keep challenging them because this doesn't sit right, and they have a lot to answer for.
But what lessons do you think should policymakers or conservation bodies take from this episode in terms of both environmental governance and institutional accountability?
Yeah. So again, the local plan. People must remember town and country planning, local plans, EIA, environmental impact assessments. There is a role for the public to play. So if there's a local plan, it's just a draft local plan, it just came out like for example, Ampang Jaya and so on. The public, if they know about it, they need to go in and put in their comments. So public can participate. In fact, it's provided for in the Act. You need to take part. So if you are a resident of Ampang Jaya or anywhere else in the country that has a lot of greenery, every time there's a draft local plan that comes out, please go and have a look and please comment, because anything that's from green going to blue has to be read in your mind already. So people must take part in the process. You cannot say, hey, we didn't know, no one told us. When in fact, Majlis Ampang Jaya can say, hey, we had a process, we opened it up for 30 days, nobody came. So if we do know that no one came forward and people slip people's minds, then we failed in taking part in the process. There's always a process. So you must stand up to say, hey, listen, I was part of the process, it still failed. And that's how we must hold people accountable. There's always a process, we must get involved.
And you can't fault them if they do want to get involved, if they do want to know about it, right? Yeah. No, so I suppose from the discussion that we had in this particular segment, I think it's not just about the sale of the land, right? It's about what you're doing with our national heritage, and that's our Zoo Negara. Zoo Negara was gifted by our first Prime Minister, entrusted to
the land
bodies,
was entrusted,
the current body in question. And it's just so sad to know that they are actually struggling to survive. And I suppose the bigger discourse here is that people do want to help.
A lot of questions, not a lot of answers, a lot of misdirection in terms of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Don't worry if it's blue and it's turned blue. It's going to be minimal. That's how it starts. From something that's green and protected and put aside since many years, is now turned into what's going to be a commercial zone. And that's not right.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew Sebastian, Chief Executive Officer of Ecotourism and Conservation Society of Malaysia. We do appreciate your time here with us. And to our audience, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our second segment. Welcome back, everybody. Now, in recent months, we've seen a worrying trend, an increase in violent incidents taking place within our schools. But beneath the headlines lies a deeper question. What's really driving the rise in violence among our young people?
Are we looking at isolated acts of aggression or signs of a larger systemic issue tied to how we nurture, discipline, and support adolescents?
And as a society, we often rush to assign blame to schools, to teachers, to parents, but rarely do we pause to ask ourselves, in retrospect, are we giving our children the safe spaces they need? And whether or not the protection that they yearn for is accessible, both at school and at home.
So in this segment, right, we hope to go beyond the blame and look at the issue through a rational, compassionate lens to understand what can be done to strengthen protection systems, early intervention, and of course, mental health support for our students.
And of course, joining us to unpack these questions is Dr. Farah Nini Dusuki, Chief Children's Commissioner at SUHAKAM. Welcome, Dr. Farah, to Beyond Headlines.
Thank you.
Now, Doctor, of course, we're in this particular discussion. It's a very somber one because, we've seen a rising case of violent acts in schools, and schools are supposed to be a safe place, especially for our child, especially when parents when they send their children to school, they don't expect something as devastating as what we've heard in the past, right, to come to them. So we want to understand the systemic roots here in terms of how we respond to tragic cases or even before it happened, right? So my question first to you would be, the recent incidents that have, transpired thus far, are we looking at the isolated incidents as incidents of their own, or is it really a measure of how we have been responsible to our children?
Thank you. It's not just one incident that happened yesterday, right? It's been a series in this past few months. And sadly, these really are not cases in isolation. I mean, they've been around for some time. Only that I think the last few ones have gained public attention. But of course, yesterday was something totally different. The nature of it, the publicity that it gets. But then it's, the rate of violence in school has existed since, I would say, quite many years ago. In fact, every 4 to 5 years, our country, the Ministry of Health, is under the duty to conduct this study in schools. And the last report, and it's called the National Health and Morbidity Survey, involving more than 30,000 children. So about 20% of children say, they have been subject to violence, either as victim or as perpetrator, and different types of violence. So when we talk about bullying, that one is the most common, and it's very sad because the rate of bullying has gone up. It's really alarming, isn't it? What we've been hearing lately, and it's as though, like when the case of Zara took place, it's as though the children are not fearful. We've heard. We look at the media itself. There's been at least 6 to 8 cases since Zara's incident where children end up in ICU.
Right. So that was the question that we actually were discussing prior to the show's recording. How are these sort of reports being trickled down to students themselves in terms of there are bigger repercussions because in the penal code, Section 507 has also been amended to also cover harassment in a broader aspect of things, right? Is this communication being trickled properly, or what's the gap there?
Okay, I think communication does not get to children, as what we expect them to be. But I do believe that it all has to start from the child. What I mean is, on how we nurture the child. And it has to start from home as well. It's not about getting all the information. All this information, knowing, what can happen as repercussion, all that. These are only deterrent factors, right? But really, the shield has got to come from the children themselves. So that's why we at the Office of the Children Commissioner, we emphasize on shared responsibility between parents, family members, the school, and the state. You see, everybody has a role to play. So it starts from home. Children must be taught that, what are acceptable behavior and what are not acceptable. And I think most importantly, they must be nurtured and shown what kindness is all about. I know it sounds so basic, right? But I don't think that is common nowadays. We look at how adults behave towards issues nowadays. You see, they are bullies themselves. So what are our children learning? We see how adults behave, and children are really not getting good examples. So that's one. We need to nurture kindness right from the very beginning so that they will also exemplify kind behaviors. But unfortunately, because perhaps they are not so, they are not nurtured with such kindness, and they don't have this shield that, I don't know how is it that children, as innocent as they should be, have this pleasure in hurting another person, another child, for example. Yeah.
But, in the recent case, as you can see, like most people, they tend to shift the blame or direct blame towards teachers and schools, when violence occur.
Yeah.
And like you were saying just now about shared responsibility, that it's not just the school or the teachers, but also from at home, and also from the people around them. It takes a village to raise a child.
Right.
It's not just isolated, I raise my child and that's basically it. But how do we shift that narrative?
Okay. Again, I think we need to emphasize on this shared responsibility concept. It is not fair, although of course when they happen in school, the responsibility lies in the school to provide safe spaces, to have surveillance in place, to have monitoring in place. But then again, like I said just now, it starts from home, and teachers are supposed to continue, whatever that has been done at home in school. But unfortunately, that is not happening. And there are many reasons, stress with academics, for example. When we talk about curriculum itself, you see students nowadays, and I cannot speak for private schools, but then I can very well speak for government schools. Students are overwhelmed with content. Let me just give you an example. I went to primary school in the 70s, in the late 70s and early 80s. And at that time, you only have 5 subjects. You have what is called the standard 5 assessment, and that's it. You see, 5 subjects, and for some reason, we did learn. You see, we did learn the basics in education, but now children have as many as 10 subjects. Now, why do primary school children need 10 subjects? And when you have so many subjects, don't forget, teachers will be expected to deliver, right? They have to deliver content. So they are so overwhelmed. And so, for example, let us take sexual violence, all right? That's taking place. Now, sexuality education is introduced at year 5. In the subject is in the health, kesihatan. The subject called health and the thing is, that particular subject is non-examinable. Now, you know how it is. When you are inundated with so many subjects which are not non-examinable, number 1, it may not even be delivered. Number 2, even if it's delivered, children will not take it seriously. So you see, you missed on that as well. I've spoken to, in 2013, I've spoken to 69 boys who are in Henry Gani prisons and Sekolah Tunas Bakti, where they were sent when they commit crimes for statutory rape. I can tell you that 85% do not even know that, going back to your point, Amalina, it is legally wrong. You see, to be sleeping with their girlfriends, for example. But once they do it, and if the girl is below 16, whether they are girlfriends or otherwise, it is statutory rape.
Yeah.
So you see, they will be found guilty. But like I say again, and they're so naive. I've spoken to one of these boys, and he said, I didn't realize that, only one encounter, she can get pregnant. It's so innocent and so naive, because you may assume that they get a lot of information, but this information, if not guided, you see, will not be of any use. You see, so that's why it is so important to look at all this in a holistic aspect. What are we expecting from our education at both primary and secondary level? We've got to be realistic about the outcomes that we want to achieve.
Do you echo what the Prime Minister actually said, that our education values today lack moral empathy and more on academics? Or are we actually shooting our, educators too much in the, shifting the blame too much then? Because we're talking about support, we're talking about trying to build a very open environment, but at the same time, when an incident happened,
Yes.
we find a scapegoat. So, yeah.
I think it's not about finding a scapegoat, but I think this is an opportunity for us to look deep into ourselves and really ask ourselves, what have we gotten our children into? You see, do they deserve this? And what is it that we have done to them? Childhood is supposed to be, a time of joy, of happiness, and not of fear, you see, of brutality. But let me tell you, the statistics on bullying, for example, has gone up by 20% among primary school children between 2023 to 2024. And it's the data by the Ministry of Education. And it's alarming, isn't it? Because when you talk about primary school children, they are between 7 years old to 12 years old, very, very young children.
Is it because now we're so very focused on what the definition of bullying is? That's why we hear a lot of cases being reported. That's why the statistics are higher now. Because in the past, you wouldn't constitute something as bullying. For instance, like maybe you just
I think back during our day, bullying was like, children being roughhousing each other and
Right.
things like
One-off
that.
incidents, right?
Yes, and it was, it wasn't termed as bullying back then.
right, yeah.
So maybe you're right. It could be something.
Possibly, but also that they are mimicking, because social media, internet, is really many of children's closest friend now.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Go to any restaurants, breakfast, lunch or dinner, you will see most of the family members all on their phones.
True.
You see? And what are we teaching our children? I mean, even during meal times that you can actually use your phone and when internet becomes the closest friend
you have.
that is very dangerous,
Right.
because therefore you have different values imparted.
I just want to segue into that, or at least expand on that a little bit. Because earlier I had this interview with criminologist Dr. Gishina Maayu, who is from the Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation as well, a member from there. She did say neglect plays a very huge part in a children's sort of, not say violent behavior, but a behavior towards something that can be
Escalate.
deemed as bad, right? Because when you don't have that interpersonal sort of like
Yes.
attachment with anybody,
Yes.
you'll think that whatever you do is right. And even if it's wrong, you don't have, individuals around you to kind of rationalize that.
Correct.
So can we talk about neglect here?
Yes, definitely. And I think many parents are neglecting their children without intending to or without realizing it. Let's face this, that life is getting busier for all of us, right? Somehow, we are running from one point to the next point, and you touch and go on most things. But, children, number one, they are watching us. Number two, they need attention more than anything else. Although you may think that they are contented with their handphones or iPads or what have you, but in reality, they need and crave that attention. And when they don't get it, they will act up, or maybe act adversely. And parents think that, they're acting up, and then, maybe scold or treat them, negatively. And that creates barriers. And so when children don't really have the opportunity to speak out their minds, their thoughts, their boredom, and do you notice now that children are not expected to be bored? And then boredom is something, is part of growing up. But, parents seem so content that,
Occupy them with something.
with something. It's as though boredom is a sin. It's not. I mean, we do, you've got to deal with it, because when you grow up, that's really part of life. But you see, I think parents need to really consider very carefully what is going on with their children. It is really not easy to raise children nowadays. I have two sets of children in different ages, and it's really quite different when raising children who are in their 30s now and children who are in their late teens, for example. Because at that time, problems faced in the 90s, for example, raising children will be like, they fall, they break their arms, you got to patch them out and bring them to hospital.
Yeah, we grew up in the 90s. So we know.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, different kind of, issues. But I do have a pair in their late teens now, and I find that, you see, for them as well, actually, the challenge is actually the social media. I mean, it's not that they are addicted to it, but somehow everybody is using it. Their friends, I mean, you want to see what the next person is doing, and also having the expectation that people want to see what you're doing and all that. So I think that's not healthy, and needs to be, parents need to speak more to their children and really limit screen time.
I also think that with social media, not just social media, internet in general, I think it makes children lose their childhood a little bit.
A lot.
They grow up. They grow up too fast.
Yeah.
And that could be also a factor, don't you think, doctor? Because they are not meant to be exposed to so many things and to grow up in such a short period of
Yes.
time, and that would create some unnecessary stress on their
Right.
mental health.
Correct.
And things like that. What are your opinion? What is your opinion on that?
Definitely. I mean, I can't agree with you. I mean, that's absolutely right. That when they rely so much on internet, they forget to stop and smell the flowers. So to speak. They don't enjoy nature, for example. And all these things. I mean, although you see some youngsters, following their friends on doing activities outdoors, but really are they using that as an escapism from as part of just being with their friends, or really appreciating nature as it is? You see, so because I do think that nowadays, really they are so consumed by internet, and research has shown that that in itself creates something to our brain. It does create something to our brain whereby sometimes it makes us lose empathy, sympathy, compassion, for example, because you're so influenced by, especially when those who are so addicted to games.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have had cases whereby they try to mimic what's in the game. It gives them a different kind of illusion, I would say.
Not just games, entertainment, basically. Entertainment sort of outlet that they consume and they enjoy themselves in, right? Immerse themselves in. Unfortunately, it's translated across in real
They lose
life.
focus of reality, lose their grip on reality, and think it's the same thing.
Which is
Doctor,
not.
based on because we're talking about the online sort of space here, right? And it's very hard to ensure that the environment is entirely 100% foolproof. You even install a firewall. Our kids are very smart. I mean, we were kids once as well. We know how to bypass it, right?
Yeah.
Correct. But because there's this rise of dark side accounts and dark profiles, and it's very alarming to know that even our young ones are also participating actively in sharing, for instance, nudes, even conducting certain acts that are actually wrong in the eyes of the law, right?
Yes.
But again, sometimes they don't know that's wrong.
Yes,
and then
they're
there's
experimenting.
yes, exactly. But then nothing is free for you to do, right? They're still underage, so in a way they are still under legal care of either their parents or guardians. So in this particular context, how alarming is it today, with the prevalence of dark side accounts on the rise, that our children might be also part of it?
Okay, it is certainly alarming. That's why I think we passed. I mean, the government passed the Online Protection Act. You see, for the very reason that the MCMC can actually order people to bring down materials which are harmful for children. But then again, that's why I say now, I think the real protection that we can build in our children is for them to have digital resilience and not just digital restriction. Because how much can you restrict? Like you said yourself just now, right? I mean, children being children, you stop them this way, they'll try another way. Stop them the other way, they try another way. You see, they're just so creative. So we need to raise children who are resilient, in the sense that's why, and for children to trust adults, you need to speak to them, talk to them right from the very beginning. You need to engage with them right from the very beginning. That's why part of protecting children is including them in the conversations. You see, when we create policies, when we make decisions about children, do we really include children? Is one of the main rights under the Convention on Rights of the Child for the child to be able to participate in decisions that affect their life. But are we actually inculcating this culture within the four walls of our home, within the four walls of our classroom, that we really appreciate their thoughts? So by the time they come to us, because I also teach at the Faculty of Law, by the time they come to us, when they expect them to be vocal and all that, you'll see that sometimes they're quite subdued, unless those who are typically very outspoken and all that. But because it is not in the culture to actually allow them to speak freely, to speak their mind. Of course, we are supposed to nurture them. I mean, some people say, oh, we are actually nurturing them to talk back to us. Why is that? I mean, if we talk to them respectfully, we will get respect in return. But if you talk down to them, that's when they retaliate and be rude to us. You see, but it's important to include them in our conversations.
I mean, there's also a lot of stigma and hesitation, especially among students, to report anything, especially on bullying. I mean, like you said, because there are maybe there's not enough safe space for them to voice out anything or to speak out, right? Yeah. So for fear of stigma or retaliation, a lot of students sometimes do not do not report things like this.
Correct.
Because they fear of not being cool, right? If you report
Exactly.
something, I'm going to alienate you.
Or
and then
like I'm a
shun.
snitch, right?
Yeah.
Two possibilities. One is that they think that they will not appear cool if they report, and they may be ostracized even. The other one is that because they don't have confidence that if they do report,
People will listen to them.
will listen and take action. You see, so this is what we need to change. We adults need to change for our children. You see,
Yes.
for our children to feel safe, we must provide those safe spaces. So we have to give them the assurance that if this is really the portal, that they can reach out to and complain and all that, we must ensure that it will not retaliate. I mean, go back to them in a nasty way, because sometimes it does. It has happened, by the way, that when they actually lodge a complaint, and then the other children got to know about it. Why is that? And that's not the way that we want that to happen, isn't it? So adults must change first for children to be able to feel safe.
Right.
I mean, to establish safer and more child-sensitive reporting channels. I think
Definitely,
something
yes.
that-
There are a few that the children can actually reach out to, organized by NGOs, and also you have by the government as well. And we are also at the Office of Children Commissioner is trying to come up with some, with a portal as well, so that children can actually reach out to us in a child-friendly manner. But we have to be really sensitive to the needs of children. When we say we want children to reach out, it must be in the language that they're comfortable with. You see, because Childline Foundation actually had this child help line for 5 years, and 80% of the calls that came in were actually children who were lonely.
Really?
Yes,
Oh, that's
children.
so sad.
Yes, that is so sad, right? I mean, you would imagine that they will be calling because they have been abused in one way or another, right? But about from the 15,000 calls that came in, 80% were really children who were having some form of mental health issues, but majority were really, they were calling after office hours because they were lonely, they had nobody at home to talk to, or they had people in the house, but they were in their room, but they felt lonely, and they just wanted to chat with somebody. So that goes to show, what really happens.
That's very heart-wrenching, actually.
It is. I mean, we grew up knowing that there's a care line called Befrienders, right? And if we're ever
Still
dealing
there?
with
Still
certain
there?
suicidal thoughts, yeah, it's still there. But knowing that this child line is now, I mean, how the behavior of it, children are actually calling it because they don't have friends, they don't have people to talk to. That's actually very, very concerning.
It is.
Yeah. To expand the discussion a little bit about how we can actually provide safer spaces for our children, we will be segueing into our interview with Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation's member and criminologist Dr. Gishanayu Masaat, and then we'll come back on the set to expand the discussion.
Obviously, peer pressure or exposure to violence, or at least coldness from your surrounding, is one major aspect. Nurture is one major aspect. But what if in a situation whereby the upbringing is good, right? It's just it's from the individual itself, like himself or herself, irrespective. And what are some of the red flags that, as a parent, as a guardian, or a concerned adult, that must be taken into consideration to ensure that there's intervention being done before a violent act is committed?
Many parents don't want to accept that their children have pro-criminal traits or pro-delinquent traits, depending on the scenario. Some parents also deny that their children need help in terms of mental distress, differences in their abilities, learning disorders, for example. So that's one of the main things that needs to be focused on, is that parents need to do assessment for their children. If we look into pro-sexualized behavior among youth, we can already assess that as young as 3 or 4 years old through the drawings. But many parents don't take that decision to have their children being assessed. The issue is that if my child is assessed, confirm my child has a problem. So they don't want to go through that. And unfortunately, this goes on when they go to school, and behaviors that are negative start to manifest. So that is one of the things that parents need to do, parents and guardians. Have your child assessed. It is important for the positive development of the child, safety of the child, as well as everyone in the community. Parents need to be aware, need to acknowledge, need to understand, most importantly, that things sometimes don't go as they plan. So they need to prepare themselves and start helping the child to become a better person. So the children are born clean, white, there's no problems, no issues, but it's the nature and the nurture. So these work together to ensure, at least to maximize the child's positive growth. So if the child already has, unfortunately, some negative traits, he or she needs to be in an environment that controls the situation so that no opportunities for delinquent behavior can arise. Some parents, some families don't even look into the nutrition of the children. Now, bad nutrition, lack of good nutrition can make things harder, can worsen things. So if they don't have enough nutrients in their bodies, in the brain development, that's going to affect their development. So many things actually that parents need to be aware of. Children are parents' responsibilities. In Islam, they are risky. So how you treat, how you develop the children will determine how they will grow up as a person. If things are not taken care of right from the start, teaching them good manners, good behavior, telling them how to read and write, it's going to get only worse. Some parents, unfortunately, wait until the children go to school and they expect the teachers to take over that responsibility, learning how to read and write, not preparing them for that school environment. Now, many children, if they don't go to the kindergarten, they've always been isolated. They only see and interact with their families. Their families know their behaviors, but when they go out into social contacts, for example, the schools, it's a whole new world for them. So huge risks, huge opportunities, a different learning environment totally from what they've been used to. So parents need to prepare themselves and their families.
Doctor, okay, so we're talking about neglect, right? But sometimes that sort of neglect comes with the factor that the access to help is not there. For instance, say a parent only know about a particular trait, a red flag that their child has, but they want to go out to push for better development. It's just that maybe it's later in the child's life, probably when they're already in a social environment, in school, later in after primary even. Okay, but then our systems, or at least the policy at B, does not allow these parents the access to the help that they need to get. For instance, because access to psychologists or counseling, probably if it's not about the cost, it's about the layers, like not enough to attend to one child. How can we be better at this? Or what is the current, in terms of the current stopgap measures that we can actually do right now?
There are actually quite a number of things that can be done. Number one, the parents got to get educated. They can't just leave it to the teachers. They can't leave it to neighbors. They can't leave it to anyone, counselors outside, to point out to them, look at your child. Your child needs help, could benefit from intervention or rehabilitation or seeing specialists. The parents themselves, now we have the internet. As long as you have a gadget, you can access information, get educated on at least the basic symptoms. There are channels that people can reach out to. Now, some websites offer free services. The ministry offers some online services which cost only 30 ringgit. It can be a bit pricey to some people. However, who is more important? What is more important? The child's future, or saving for something else? So you've got to have a balance and determination on your priorities.
And in Malaysia, we also know that our adolescents have access to the dark side profiles. So much so, sometimes it's without, obviously, parental supervision. How can the government actually address this with a carrot and stick approach? Because honestly, this is more than just having to have a space, room for diplomacy in this sort of context, right? You're familiar with the dark side sort of contents, right?
Yeah. Again, it starts from prevention. So first of all, is the role of the parents, uh, because parents are responsible for the children, and then it goes a wider group to schools, the society, the neighborhood, and then finally to the government. Because even though the government does have policies in place, enforcement in place, alternatives, ideas going on, enforcement of this, of that, but sometimes taking all this into consideration, the child without the supervision still makes effort to access dark web things, dark web images, the profiles that's available online. They will make effort. So everyone needs to be involved in this. The government does move forward, and it is government departments are currently in meetings, in discussions on how to tighten existing policies. And in fact, new legislation will be coming up later this year as well as next year to improve safety online, especially for children. But look, for example, that the cases that happened in Sabah, the recent cases. So despite being aware, despite it being viral, the whole world knows about it, still children in schools in other parts of Malaysia commit delinquent acts. So we have the safeguards in place, but when there's a will for people to find out information, find out, get sources, they will put that effort in. So again, it goes back to the parental control, the school control, to ensure that environments are safe for children and children do not find access, do not put effort in finding access and get information that is harmful to them and other people.
How can the role of PIBG, parent-teacher groups, be better, create better dynamics so that reporting can be made safer, confidentiality can be upholded, as well as intervention mechanisms can be pushed where all layers of society is able to assess it?
Well, number one, everyone must cooperate. Normally, in cases of PIBG meetings, many funders don't turn up. So the information is there, but they don't get the information because one, they don't turn up. And many times there's resistance. So one party suggests this, the other party says no. And then they get into conflict. So they don't come together to actually create, solutions that are viable, solutions that can work out. There will be 1,001 excuses for people not to get together, involve, work on a solution, move forward with that solution until completion to see whether or not it's effective. So number one is that everyone must cooperate. Sure, there are ways to negotiate what can and cannot be done, but everyone must cooperate to ensure that, bottom line, children are safe.
Doctor, earlier Dr. Gashina did say about how the role of a PIBG makeup in a particular school environment is very important in ensuring that continuity exists. For instance, how you nurture at home, how you nurture in school, and now you go out from school, extracurricular or with your friends, and then coming back to home. So it has to be a cohesive sort of effort, right? What do you think? Do you think the makeup of a lot of our parent-teacher groups today are too angsty, meaning like it's too individualistic, or is it more collective?
I wish I can say it is more collective, but it is not. I think a lot of people are working very hard for children, but maybe working in silos. You see, we lack meaningful collaboration. You see, when we say we have PIBG should be working together with school, first of all, does PIBG have children representation? You see, because I've been in PIBGs before, and you're actually talking about what's good for children, what's not so good for them, but you don't really listen to them. You're listening what adults are talking, what adults are saying about what's good or what's not good for children. So that's why you when you try to effect changes, they are not so meaningful to the child, and when they are not meaningful to the child, you do not get the results that you want and hope for. You see, so that's where you talk about like the portal, right? You've got to test it, whether or not it is really easy for the child. For example, we often at our office, we have a children representative, children consultative council, and we consult our children when we want to make decisions affecting them in a big way, especially. You see, because there's no point in not involving them. So that's why, coming back to your question, yes, people should be working collaboratively and not just cooperatively. Because when people cooperate, they just want to achieve their individual targets. Like, for example, PIBG has got their own targets. Teachers have got their own targets, right? At the end of the year, whatever, what they need to achieve for the school. But then if you actually work collaboratively, you have a common goal. What is it that you want for the school, for the child? You see, do you really want to produce lots of A's, but not so mindful about the holistic child concept, for example? Are we really looking into the holistic child concept whereby, a child, first of all, needs to be happy? When was the last time that we really consider what it takes to make a child happy? I don't think so. We really consider that, and due to their unhappiness, we are seeing a lot of things happening, isn't it? Like last time they used to just do things quietly, right? Now they are recording it, and we are wondering, like, I mean, for us it's shameful enough. Like, you are recording it and like you're so proud of it, but then again, that's children now. You see, for them it's maybe performance. You never know. It's like maybe it's something that they want to
Immediate gratification, right? It's the age of that, yeah.
Like, being able to, like, you think that they are, wow, like cool, maybe. You don't know. I mean, it's the different way of thinking. It's not the same as when you were raised, like in the 90s, or when I was raised in the 70s and 80s. You see, it has totally changed.
But it would be a bit like how do I say, macam over sort of like misrepresentation. Like if we were to say in the past there are no social ills, I think I mean during my time gangsterism was quite huge.
I think the main challenge is not being equipped adequately. Teachers are not equipped with trauma informed skills, to actually identify, for example, like what happened yesterday or 2 days ago, whereby, I mean, surely there were some signs before this, some signs that you can actually see that what's going on, and be suspicious. For example, I know for a fact when I was doing my doctorate in the late 90s, at that time, for incest, so one of the incest, of course, as you know, happens in silence and secrecy, right? So one of the reasons why it get to the top of the iceberg is via teachers identifying that their students are not as happy as they used to be, or not performing as they used to be. And I remember this one heart-wrenching case, of a girl who, when the teacher saw that she was really going downhill in her studies, the teacher actually asked her, and then she just gave her bag to the teacher. And when the teacher opened the bag, and this was a 14-year-old girl, opened the bag, the teacher found a letter, a letter from the older sister to the father, a single father, writing to the father, asking the father to stop molesting and raping the sister. Because the older sister has already left. They too, when, I know, right? I still remember
I'm getting
today.
like goosebumps, and goosebumps not in a bad way lah. Like,
but the thing is, look at that. I mean, the teacher was able to identify, because I would imagine that in the late 80s, then she had less classes, I mean, she had less students in her class, and she had less subjects to deliver. So she was able to have that, interpersonal relationship with her children. You see, I remember my teachers to this day because of their unique ways of raising us. They scolded us like nobody's business, but then we accepted it. And when my mom sent me to school, my mom would tell the teacher, treat my child like your own. You see, and I did this. I did the same for all of my 6 children as well. When I went to the school, I said, cikgu, buatlah macam anak cikgu sendiri. Like in other words, if you need to teach my child, do so. And tell me, you see, if he has done anything that, I should worry about.
Right.
But is it happening now? We are seeing the adverse, right? That the concern is mostly about academic, and then if a teacher were to lift a finger towards your child, and then not even lift a finger, raise your voice, raise a voice or whatever, then the child will be coming back running. I'm not for harsh treatment towards children. Don't get me wrong, punitive. I'm not for that. But I do think that children has to understand that, apart from having rights, they also need to have responsibilities. So you cannot just empower children with rights. You need to balance rights with responsibilities. And part of, being responsible is also to be accountable for their actions.
Right.
So if they have done wrong, they should understand that it is wrong, and they have to face the music for doing a wrong thing. But of course, you cannot go beyond the line in disciplining and all that.
That's true. I'm sorry, but we already have so much to say, but unfortunately, time does not permit us. But then, of course, with that, right, Doctor, I do want to understand this in terms of the long-term sort of measure that we need to actually take to ensure that no child is neglected, no child is left behind, and there will be no lives lost. Unfortunately, it's very hard for me to say that. Unfortunately, because already we've seen deaths and we've seen more than just a brush of injury. It's very concerning state
Physical
right now.
assault and
Yeah. So what sort of long-term measure that we must put in place right now to ensure that urgently that our children are actually very much protected?
Okay, you said long-term measure just now, and I think when we talk about long-term measure, we have to reconsider the curriculum, we have to teach teachers' workload, we have to teach all that. Those will be long-term. But immediately, we must react, meaning to say that school safety guidelines must be, there is school safety policy in schools, right? But are they being enforced strictly? You see, my daughter goes to an all-girls school, and she laments the fact about how strict the teachers are, the prefects are, checking their bags, checking, they're actually wearing the right socks, for example, and she gets so irritated. But then again, because of that, they will not dare do anything out of the ordinary. You see, the first thing when I heard about what happened in the school in Bandar Utama was that how did a child was able to bring
weapons
to school
of that kind, right?
Of that kind, correct. Yeah, so that is why I think surveillance and monitoring must be employed immediately. You see, I think everybody should be in this panic state at schools, whereby what can we do to make our schools safe immediately, and you cannot wait for that one.
Right.
But of course, long term, of course, you have to sit down and really get things threshed out.
I posed this question to Dr. Gashina earlier, whether or not screening, psychological screening should be made mandatory. And she said yes. How about you?
Of course, that is something that we have to do. But then again, do we have the capacity to do it? But, I read somewhere that it has to be done every 6 months. You see, ideally, it should be done every 6 months so that if there's any telltale signs, you're able to sort of divert the case to somebody who's more competent to handle it, right? But then again, we have to also think about capacity. But yes, you need to do so. But I think as a first, as a one of the measures that need to be undertaken quite immediately is increase the counsellors in the school. In Malaysia, one counsellor is managing 500 to 600 students. How is that possible? You see?
it's very touch-based,
Of course. Because
touch and go, sorry.
Like a tokenism.
because internationally, it should be 1 to 250.
Yeah.
1 to 50.
Yeah.
Okay. But even in a classroom, a teacher who manages a class of 40 students aren't able to assess everybody, right?
Exactly. So that's why you should have this basic trauma-informed skills and all that.
Yes. But of course, when we talk about our children, right, there's a very pertinent, role here that mothers and fathers, or at least guardians, play a part, because you are the first point to person that the child reaches out to, and the rest should be supporting that.
True.
Right? So at the end of the day, as much as we want to blame the people around us, we should be looking at how internalize, right? So the one last remark that you'd like to make.
Repeating what you said earlier, it takes a village to raise a child, but putting it more realistically, everybody has a role to play. Uncles, aunties, siblings, everybody must look out for each other. if we can go back to the mantra that we had during COVID, kita jaga kita, I think we should empower our children with that, and we should empower parents as well, because I can tell you parenting nowadays is very challenging. So you see, you got to go back to your siblings. You got to you extended family system. I think is very important, very very important. And by saying that, I mean everybody really has to be that person for the child.
With that, thank you so much, Dr. Farah Nini Dusuki, for your insights and for joining us on Beyond the Headlines. We do appreciate it. To our audience, if you do like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get NSC Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news report will be delivered to you. Now, I'd like to also thank Elena Koshy for being here.
Thank you, Amalina, for having me.
And thank you again, Dr. Farah. To our audience, don't forget to also follow us on our socials. We are on Facebook, X, Threads, as well as TikTok and Instagram. My name is Amalina Kamal, and I'll see you next time.